Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews. Nearly said analysing Avatar. Dodge that bullet. This is the problem when you do 20 episodes of something in a row. Then you change to something else. Always a danger that this is going to get called analysing Avatar at some point. But yeah, welcome to Rewind Reviews, everyone. The podcast where we take a look at various films, generally from our past, although sometimes we sit through All About Steve. But mostly it's films from our past that we either unequivocally love and can't wait to rewatch and discuss with a more critical view. Sometimes it's films we've not seen in a while and we wonder if they hold up. Sometimes it's movies we outright know probably don't stand the test of time. But it's always a great excuse to go back and check them out. And this week, it was my turn to pick, and I selected Tim Burton's Beetlejuice, which is a film I have very, very, very fond memories of. I have a real fondness for this because
almost sounded like you were questioning it then. Which is a film?
Which is a film. Well, I'm trying to think back with my history of it because I remember how I first saw it, which is by accident. This is the second film we've done on this that I found in the same way, which is that basically I used to record a lot of things off the TV on VHS, and that would sometimes mean leaving the thing recording because I was leaving the house. That's why I was recording it, and it would end up recording the thing that aired after the thing. So I would.
Plus, you're not a fool. You'd always record on long play, which meant you could get 6 hours, not 3. Yeah.
Precisely. Record on long play, you get 6 hours of recording, and what would end up happening, generally speaking, is I'd catch the thing I intended to record, whatever that was, followed by whatever then aired. And sometimes that led to me discovering some interesting things. We reviewed Quick Change on this very podcast, and Quick Change was a movie I discovered in pretty much the exact same way. But obviously, the great thing about discovering a film that way is I didn't know what the film was. I opened the movie, and it's a journey of discovery for me because I've not got a cover. I've not got a title. I don't really know the cast. Although, ironically, both these movies, this and Quick Change, both star Gina Davis, which is weird that the two Gina Davis movies I'm most familiar with I found in the exact same way. That's just a weird coincidence. But so I literally I had something on VHS. I can't remember exactly what it was. And then at the end of it, this movie just sort of started, and I was just watching it, and I'm like, what is this? And then, obviously, when the weirder it gets, the more it sucks in young Dan. And the imagination involved, I think, is a big factor in my love of this movie. And it makes sense when you go back and you know that I'm, how fond I was of like Night Before Christmas. Something about this tone and this sort of weird, skewed perspective, sort of this Tim Burton's vision for like gothic imagery and stuff just seems to have really worked for me, even when the storytelling isn't exactly perfect. We had some criticisms of Night Before Christmas's approach to storytelling and character work, particularly. So yeah, I had a really fond memory. I have very fond memories of this movie, but I hadn't seen it in a good couple of years. It's not a movie I go back to yearly, so this was a very interesting experiment. But I'm curious, Kirstie, you don't have any history with this movie at all. So my two questions to you straight away are obviously, what did you know about the film going in, and how did you feel once you'd seen it? Like a summary of sort of how it hit you when you did finally sit down to watch it.
Not much. I knew the basic premise of. I don't think I even knew the people were dead. I just spoilers. Obviously spoilers from here on out. I knew that the film was essentially Beetlejuice terrorizing people. I think I knew maybe trying to get them out of a house, but that is really it. My main knowledge was that Michael Keaton played Beetlejuice.
Right.
And that was pretty much it. And I knew that there was potentially a sequel called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian that they talked to Kevin Smith about that never happened.
I still love Kevin Smith basically made that movie impossible to ever make because it's genuinely is called that. That is genuinely the script that was written, was called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. And in one sentence, Kevin Smith made them never be able to make that movie, which is, didn't we say all we needed to say in the first Beetlejuice? And must he go tropical?
Yeah,
which is just an amazing sentence.
Great line. So that was kind of my knowledge, and it's so funny, like watching it with that frame, where you sit down expecting to see a movie where Michael Keaton terrorizes people, and Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice doesn't show up for like, the movie's not really about Beetlejuice at all. Like,
No, not at all.
I think these days, if it was released in a modern context, that would really annoy people. Like, if, the poster was what the poster is. I haven't seen the trailer, but, you'd really trailer it about Michael Keaton. I think people would be on Twitter going, it doesn't even turn up properly for like 47 minutes.
Yep.
Like,
so I was keeping an eye on that because my memory of it is that for me as a viewer, not knowing anything about the movie, with no expectation of Michael Keaton, with no expectation of Beetlejuice as a character, as the movie is unfolding and he's being built up with little shots and teases and mentions, I'm becoming more and more in like, whoa, who's this character? What's this they're setting up? It was like in a moment, it was like it wasn't a point of contention, it was a point of intrigue. What's the movie building?
I think it works. Yeah.
So it's funny how it works better outside of I wouldn't even say marketing, because obviously these days the movie is not known through marketing, it's known through social sort of cultural osmosis. So people who know about this movie know about it from what they've picked up culturally rather than like a trailer they've seen. But yeah, it's funny how those expectations would shift people's viewings of this movie. I think I might have actually been lucky enough to have the ideal viewing of this movie, which is just going in with zero expectations, knowledge, understanding, not even really knowing the movie's title. I'm sure there's a title card up at the front or whatever, but I was just casually just like, what is this? So yeah, the way that builds, and you get little shots of like him from behind. He's sat on a sofa reading a newspaper. You can hear his voice, but you can't see him. Like when he finally is fully revealed, 47 minutes ish in. It's a very captivating scene, because I think partly the way the movie builds him up. But what's your general thoughts, Dan? Is this something you enjoyed? Something you didn't enjoy?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think the main word is imagination. I think the imagination in the movie is just insane. The effects, the kind of monsters, the heads shrinking and like turning into like pterodactyl heads and stuff. It's a very hyper real world, which works. Nothing's really explained. You just have to kind of work out what's going on. There's the cat. If you're analyzing it critically, the character actions are a little inconsistent and they're not reacting like normal people, but it's a very hyper real world. I think maybe not as defined as Nightmare Before Christmas or Edward Scissorhands. Right. But I don't think that means it doesn't work at all. It's a lot of fun. I think it is a film you need to watch as a kid.
Right.
I wouldn't sit here now, a bit like Nightmare Before Christmas, I suppose, and go, I'm going to rewatch this every year. It didn't connect with me like that. But equally, I wasn't sat there going, I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense. This is weird, or anything like that. Because I was swept up by the imagination on display and the filmmaking on display. Like, it along with Nightmare and Edward Scissorhands is, Tim Burton at his finest. And certainly, comparatively to recent Tim Burton movies, you look at something like this and you go, well, this is why the man is, a legend. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I don't know if I really enjoyed it. I liked it. I was like, cool, yeah, sure. It's good fun.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, when you think back to when you look at Tim Burton's whole career as a director, because the movies that stand out mostly for me are this one and Edward Scissorhands, and as you mentioned as well, we talked about already, Night Before Christmas. But the one the one that I didn't even know was a Tim Burton movie when I saw it as a kid, and didn't connect it to these sort of, because you can easily draw a line between like Nightmare Before Christmas and this. I think there's an aesthetic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I think if you showed to somebody who didn't know, who just been in a coma through like I don't know the 80s or something, the 80s and 90s, these two movies, they could probably, even if you'd sort of scratched out the names of the people involved, even though Tim Burton obviously didn't direct. Before the comments come, we know Tim Burton didn't direct Night Before Christmas, but obviously it's based on it's based on his work and stuff. It's that aesthetic still, I think, design wise. I do think people could draw a line between the two, and even Edward Scissorhands. I think it's interesting, though, because in the midst of all that, one of my other favourite Tim Burton movies is Ed Wood, which is not this at all. A completely different style, tone. You'd never know. And I think he was a lot more versatile, it seems, in his earlier days, or at least he's chosen projects in his later years that are a little bit more like within a box that he can, that there is a defined sort of what is a Tim Burton film now, and he seems to mostly make that. And I you look back at his early movies, like he made Mars Attacks. Like people forget about Mars Attacks. I believe he directed that Sleepy Hollow movie as well, which I also thought was quite fun, the one with Johnny Depp. So yeah, like I mean, he made Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That was the movie that got him this movie. So
yeah, which also has a hell of a lot of imagination and a similar aesthetic again, doesn't it?
Right. So while there are a couple of films in his early back catalogue that you can draw a line through, I think most notably Edward Scissorhands, this, and Night Before Christmas, he definitely was doing a lot more like mixed up stuff. Obviously the first Batman film, which we haven't even mentioned thus far if we're talking about his stuff. Mars Attacks, Sleepy Hollow, even that Planet of the Apes sequel, which is God, whoa. That Planet of the Apes. I say sequel, sorry, the kind of reboot, whatever you want to call that mess of a movie he made, which has some of the most impressive special effects, practical effects I've ever seen. The monkey makeup's amazing. It's a real bad script. That's the main problem with that one. But yeah, it's interesting. It's just interesting.
Fair play to him though for the range, like you say. Like the range of movies really is. He's nuts.
Heap of stuff. So anyway, coming back to this one, yeah, rewatching it for me was really interesting because I was forced to atone with the version of this movie that exists in my head, rather than the reality of the film. And I think it's funny because all of the stuff that I remember loving about the film is present for sure. I think it's funny and creative and smart and colourful and almost like a live action cartoon in places. It is this sort of hyper real world, not just in the sense of the visuals and the fact it's a story about like sort of this other world where like ghosts and things exist, but even the human characters that have yet to step into that world act insane regularly. It's a very, very, like, all the characters are very hyper realized. None of these characters are like the sort of people you find in our world. They're all very exaggerated. Even the small character of the estate agent lady that wants to sell the property, who's like so like absurdly determined to sell the property that she's like showing up in the first thing in the morning. They say it's like 6 a.m. or something like that. She's like banging on the door trying to convince them to sell. Like she's insane. Like these characters are insane. This is not how people behave. But it kind of works. There's two ways you approach that with a movie like this. Is one, you sort of only make the characters that have already crossed over into the sort of other side, the sort of supernatural element of the story, like that, and you make all the other characters completely normal, or you just shrug and go, you know what, this whole thing is mental. Like let's not pretend this isn't like a sort of almost like its own kind of B movie. It's no, these characters are all sort of very exaggerated, and we're going to use that for comedy and for dramatic effect. So all that stuff, which I love about this movie, is all still present. But what I think is way lacking, and what I filled in the gaps in my head, is character stuff.
Yeah.
My memory going into this particularly is that they did a really great job characterizing the relationship between the two leads and Lydia. and that it was really clear how much they cared for each other, and that it was very clear, like, that they did it across a bunch of scenes and really sort of sold it. But let's be honest, Barbara and Adam share about 3 scenes with Lydia, and the rest of it is done through quite subtle means, that relationship. Now, the subtle details are lovely. I'll give a couple of quick examples. One is when they do the famous Deo scene, which we will come back to, because that scene is iconic for a reason. We'll come back to it, I promise. But when they do that scene, you'll note that Lydia doesn't get touched. She backs out of the scene. She sort of backs out of the dance, as it were, because they're not going to haunt her. There are also several other moments where they're like, where their thoughts immediately, shift to her. But the problem is, those sort of moments are lovely, and in a movie that did a better job establishing the character relationships, they would be supplementing that, supporting that. But almost like Nightmare Before Christmas, we're sort of told what the characters feel for each other, but aren't effectively shown them in major ways. We talked a lot when we watched Night Before Christmas about how Jack and Sally share barely screen time. We're just repeatedly told they're close, so that the love story at the end kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But only kind of, because we were told it. So the idea in this movie, which is that this couple, who they have a hint at the beginning, they're thinking about kids. They sort of become very fond of this girl Lydia, and it leads to that ending, which is very sweet. But is it established? Does it actually get set up? I don't know. I'm not so sure.
No, I think they almost do more, because I think the interpretation I had at the beginning was that they tried for kids and it didn't work out.
Right.
Because I think he says something like, "We can try again on holiday" or something.
Yes.
Because also within that they kind of almost have as many scenes with the parents and as much interaction with the parents, and you're kind of at the end going, why is this suddenly all about these 3 and not a harmonious everyone's, there's a hint of it, like the dad goes, "Oh, looks like she did well," and it's almost like this weird connotation of, it's almost uncomfortable, because it's almost the fact that I was expecting the dad to then go down and party and celebrate with them, because the 5 of them are now living harmoniously in the house.
Yes.
But the fact that the dad doesn't do that almost kind of gives the impression that he's passed over parenting duties to them. And another nice little touch is that since interacting with them and becoming close to them, she's become a bit more open. We see her interacting with people at school, and she's clearly a bit more relaxed and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that is all lovely. But yeah, I think you're right. They don't... Not only is that ending not actually embedded throughout, but there's sort of a slight sinister twist on it, and maybe that's deliberate, but yeah.
That's a really good point, actually, because maybe the intention was to sort of make, because it feels like, oh, now they live as a threesome, as a family unit of 3, and her original parents are just still there. Which is quite a dark idea in the end. But to be fair,
again, it wouldn't surprise me if that was deliberate. I mean,
Yeah, I was just about to say, but you're right. Like, I'd never thought about it from this perspective, but you're right. It maybe that sort of idea was to give it a slightly dark ending, that those 2 parents were kind of like shoved off to the side, which was kind of understandable, because they're not shown to be the best people in the movie, particularly Catherine O'Hara's character, Delia or Dahlia. Is it Dahlia or Delia?
I think so. Yeah,
it's one of them. Anyway, so it's Delia. I just looked it up. There you go. Delia, not Dahlia. So, yeah, I thought it was really interesting the way they handled that. And I think just in general, it's a lot of the movie telling you what the character relationships are, rather than actually doing the legwork of demonstrating it. Wouldn't it have just been nice to have scenes of Lydia up in the attic, chatting with those 2, and not about the plot, but like interacting in ways that are like showing that they're really starting to get on? Would that not have improved this movie 1,000-fold?
Yeah, definitely.
They do a pretty good job establishing Adam and Barbara's relationship with each other. We get scenes of them before it all goes mental, in the early stages of the movie, where you get to see how much they care for each other and stuff. So that works. The developing relationship they have with Lydia is just told to us by them repeatedly saying, "Oh, we care about that little girl," and it's just like, well, wait a minute. First of all, she's like, that actress is like 17 years old. So what do you mean by little girl? Is she supposed to be a little girl they've cast up? I don't really understand movie. That makes sense. But also, it's just like, you're just telling me that that's how you feel. Like, please demonstrate this. Put them on screen together repeatedly so I get it.
I think the other memory thing I'd imagine would be that you would remember in your head, it would be like Beetlejuice terrorized everyone more, when actually he kind of has one scene with each person. He has more scenes with Adam and Barbara, is it? Mm-hmm. But big sort of terrorizing them scenes, he's not got too many with everyone. So yeah, I imagine there must be people that look back on this and go, oh, like, I thought more of this movie was about Beetlejuice interacting with these people. And like you say, I think it's done well, though. I think the build-up's done well.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of this is about fictional marketing if it was released now, although the film is called Beetlejuice. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because essentially the premise of this movie, which is genius, and I hadn't really thought about this until this rewatch, but this movie is essentially a haunted house movie from the other perspective. It's two people die, and they're trying to haunt the family because they want them out of their house, but you're on their side, and they're the good guys, and the family are the villainous ones that have come in and invaded the home. And one of the very clever...
yeah, that's great, yeah.
And one of the very clever choices they made it about the house. The house, seeing it change as the movie goes on, from this sort of rustic home that they'd built for themselves to having Catherine O'Hara's character slowly destroy it with, like, modernism and all these angles and like what the house looks like towards the end of the movie, once they've added all the the structures to it and repainted it on the outside and the inside of it with all the sculptures and stuff. It's like a different set. It looks completely different, but the house feels alive and evolving throughout the movie, and the more it evolves, the more you feel our lead character's failing, right? And the idea in principle of a haunted house movie from the other perspective is, I mean, I don't want to put it's genius. I don't want, what I mean? I don't want to sound like I'm picking that up too much. I think that is genuinely one of the smartest ideas I've ever heard. Like, that's so clever. What a perspective, shift. And the way they achieve that is through a lot of really very clever storytelling choices right up top, which is, framing Delia as kind of almost a villain, but not really. She's just because she's not doing anything to hurt anyone, but what she's doing is ultimately, hurting the other two. And I think it's interesting as well when we come back to the house at the end of the movie, it's sort of reverted, which again suggests that they've sort of let the original owners of the home, sort of Barbara and Adam, sort of take it back, which is, I guess that's kind of like the movie's like victory. I guess, yeah, we've already said spoilers for this, but we usually say if we recommend or don't recommend before we say spoilers, but we didn't do that this time. Recommend very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely recommend.
Yeah. So if anyone hasn't seen this, go check it out. Sorry, we've spoiled so much of the movie for you. The Beetlejuice element of it is interesting, isn't it? Then, because to come back to your point, I could definitely see people misremembering. I must admit, one of the things I didn't remember correctly was that he doesn't show up for quite some time. I knew that going into it because I just remember that feeling of anticipation from when I watched it as a kid. But once he showed up, I did expect it to be more about him. Like, once they make that choice to involve him in their attempts to scare off this family, my memory of it was that it is then a constant sliding scale of like escalating Beetlejuice antics. But it's really not.
Especially because of the rules of it seem like you have to say his name 3 times and then he comes back, but it maybe if it's ghosts saying it, he's only then visible to them. It has to be said by someone living for him to be visible to the living world. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's pretty vague, isn't it? But I guess the first
Yeah.
time the I think it's Barbara that summons him. When she does, she sends him back before he really gets to do any damage that time, and then it takes Lydia freeing him.
Yeah,
because Lydia doesn't know she can send him back. Only Barbara works that out. That it gets out of hand. I guess that's how it kind of works.
The more,
but yeah,
the more I think, because we talked a little bit about that at the beginning as well. But I think that is alienating for the almost lack of Beetlejuice, and I can certainly imagine
for modern
people memories suggesting that he's there for longer. The more I think about it, the more the ending it does. The more you poke at the ending, the more I think it falls apart a little bit. Because like the thing that turns them round and in the end bonds them is Barbara saving Winona Ryder's character from Beetlejuice, right? So we've got an action there that bonds them all together and is fundamentally, presumably at its core, gratitude for saving their daughter. Mm-hmm. And that then leads to them just letting go of wanting the house to be a certain way, but they're going to live in it with it how it was when they didn't like it. And then kind of they're going to take over being the parents, but I don't think the movie does a good enough job of explaining why the house reverts back, why the parents have allowed this, why, because I'm just looking now, I don't think we see the mum again in that last scene.
No, it's just the dad. Yeah. Catherine O'Hara is gone, which is interesting because I always wondered, and I had this for I say notes. I'll be honest with you, Chris, we're flying a bit loosey-goosey this week because my notes were very thin because I just kind of watched. So in the past, when we've watched a movie I've really enjoyed, I've just watched it and then I've gone back through and made notes later. But I didn't have time to watch this one twice, so I just watched it and put my thoughts down afterwards. So we don't really have notes. But one thing I did wonder on this reviewing is, are they implying that Delia's gone? Because she's stepmother.
Oh yeah.
Are they implying that the dad and the ghosts live in the house, and he wanted it all rustic and original as well? The changes to the house came from...
But the last scene when she's in is the five of them smiling at each other,
right,
and being very much like, hey, like.
I think you're right. It's fixed. It's easily fixed, isn't it? If you just show them, if you show that the house is kind of maybe a mix of both now. Some of her sculptures are on display, but it's not a complete angular modern monstrosity like it was. It's almost like a blending of the two. Might have visually represented the families coming together, right? And then you're right. So for those who don't remember the end of the movie, which is Lydia comes home from school. She's passed a test, so she gets to do this fun ghost dance thing where she floats up above the stairs, and everyone. It's a great moment. And it's that song. It's jump in the line. Is that what it's called? It's a brilliant song. Really fun, full of energy. And they cut to the dad upstairs, and he's just like, I guess she passed the test. You're right though. It's simple. You have the family together. You have them come downstairs and join in. That's very simple, and it wouldn't need much.
Because he's reading a book that's The Living and the Dead, Harmonious Lifestyles and Peaceful Coexistence.
Okay, I never noticed that. That's very good.
So that implication is there. But I feel like it would have been a step too far to have the parents join in with the dance, and they really wanted the dance. Is I feel like what's happened. But there's no indication. Oh wait, hold on. The mum is there. She scares him with a.
She has the statue, doesn't she?
With a statue.
Yeah, she's been inspired by Beetlejuice's aesthetic to create a statue of his head. Sorry, you're absolutely right. That's exactly correct.
Yeah, and she says he likes it.
That's
and
right.
then goes off. But I just don't think it's... the parents and Barbara and Adam of it all, I don't think is explained, justified. I think that needs a bit more detail. And like I say, it kind of feels like it's not there because they wanted this fun ending where she does the dance.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it's... Which I'll be honest with you, Chris, like, I do remember. Like,
yeah, it's a fun ending, yeah.
Like when you say to me, like, before sitting down to rewatch this, what are your memories of this? I remember Beetlejuice being trapped in the model, which I think is such a cool visual. We'll come back to the model. I think the model frames a lot of the visuals of this movie and works really well. I remember the house and particularly the sculptures coming to life at the end. That always sticks out with me. Obviously the Deo scene, which will come again. We'll I promise we'll do that next. And then that ending. That ending is, and I always remember the waiting room with all the other dead people, because my question always was, if everybody looks how they did when they died, why aren't these two wet?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it turns out, having been through the trivia, which we'll get to, there is an explanation for that. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But
yeah, I don't think I necessarily interpreted it as, because that sort of mermaid creature on reception presumably didn't look like that when she died.
Yeah, but she had the injuries from her death though, because she shows them the cuts on her wrists.
Yes, that's true.
Which
is a really dark moment.
Well, okay, we can talk about that now very quickly, because I think there's something genius that happens with that. I don't know if you were aware of this, or if you put it together, because I didn't clock it, but Nadia did. There's a random throwaway line later in the movie when Otho states, as a sort of wry joke at the dinner table, that people who commit suicide end up as civil servants in the afterlife.
Ah.
But if you go back to the bit where they were in the offices doing the waiting room, the ghosts that Adam and Barbara meet are people who appear to have ended their own lives. The receptionist clearly indicates she's committed suicide, and then there's a man who hung himself behind her, going around collecting like paperwork or something. The crushed messenger guy it's implied he kind of did it to himself, threw himself in front of a boss or something. But Juno herself looks normal, but there are scars on her neck that indicate she might have cut her own throat. It's
wow. There are because obviously there's a really kind of dark side to that idea, but there are. The afterlife especially scene is full of really interesting ideas. The notion that if a ghost is exorcised, they become lost souls that can't interact. The notion of that being death for death is a very imaginative idea.
Right. Yeah.
Which obviously embeds and adds a threat to the end. But fundamentally, that's one of those ideas where you go, there could almost be an entire movie about that.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. Because the sort of because what are the how do you put anyone in danger in a movie where the two main characters that we actually care about are already dead? I guess you just go for Lydia. You just put Lydia in danger, right? That's I guess the answer.
Yeah, which they also do.
Yeah, So it's I guess double threat. But to put our two leads in progressive threat, other than just the threat to their home. I guess it's that idea, which is, super creative. I think some of the early Greek myths had an idea of that as well. The idea that these godly immortal figures there was a death for them too, and it was kind of played on that idea. I feel like the Disney Hercules movie had a premise similar to that. Maybe. At some point we're going to have to go back and watch that one, because that was one of my absolute favorites when I was a kid as well. That and Aladdin. Oh. Love those movies so much. So we'll come back to those. But yeah, so let's talk to finish up the last point very quickly. Apparently there's cut stuff that was going to explain that Beetlejuice had hung himself also due to heartbreak. Which it's kind of it's interesting. I think it's sort of because Beetlejuice is weirdly sort of female focused in this movie, which I'd forgotten. We'll come to that, I think.
Also a little problematic.
It's a little problematic, but we'll come back to that because he's a villainous character, so the movie doesn't frame him. This is the interesting thing, isn't it? When the story doesn't frame his behavior as good and correct, it's kind of like, well, is that problematic or is that just a bad character doing bad things? It's like, I don't know, but yes, he's certainly not made out to be a hero in this movie. So yeah, that's a different thing. So yes, there was cut stuff that would have explained that, and I think that explains a lot of his character's behavior in this movie. So let's talk about the Deo scene, because I think this scene, like, it's what a lot of people remember. For those who have, for whatever reason, forgotten it, it's the sequence in which the family are having a dinner party, and it's when it coincides with Barbara and Adam having decided finally to really up the ante in terms of scaring them and trying to get them out of the house through their own means, through their own abilities as ghosts. And what I think is great about this scene, first of all, is the choice to not show Adam and Barbara manipulating events. We see that entire sequence from the perspective of the living people without seeing the behind the strings side of it, if that makes sense. You know, we never see Adam and Barbara like at the side with their hands out, like sort of working them like puppets or anything like that, which I think actually helps sell the sequence so much more. And basically, Catherine O'Hara character Delia starts just sort of singing this song, this Deo, and then she gets up and starts dancing. And at first, everyone else is like, "Oh, very funny. What are you doing?" And then they all start doing it too. And there's this amazing, and I will say, a big part of why this scene works so well is that all the actors, their faces regularly flick from like totally into it, enjoying it, like swaying with the music, and then they're still swaying and doing the movements, but their facial expressions show almost terror, like concern, confusion, but they just have brief flickers of it. I don't know if that's a Tim Burton direction where he told the actors to do that, or if one of them made that choice and the rest followed. I don't know, but it's fucking incredible. And as the sequence progresses, it just goes on for so long that it becomes even funnier because it is really long. The dancing's all really good, the song's great, and then it ends with this amazing thing, which is the prop that's been on the table the whole time, which are these like absurd and elaborate and like cartoony shrimp sticking out of this bowl turn into like monster hands that grab their faces and throw them all down. It's just genius. Everything about it, top to bottom, that sequence, from when it starts to when it ends, including the subtle choice to show Lydia slipping away rather than being involved in this haunting, which tells us something about the characters and how they're starting to feel about each other. Again, supplementary, would have been better with a bit more work put into it. But yeah, that whole sequence, top to bottom, is one of the most amazing parts of this video. I just love it so much. Everything about it is great, and it doesn't surprise me at all that it became quite an iconic scene from the film. I was curious as because I was anticipating that scene when she started singing. How did you react in general, Chris?
That's just like, what's going on here? Like, it is a very entertaining scene. I think it's more entertaining when you know what's happening. Like, at the first time you watch it, you're like, huh? But I imagine, again, as a young child accidentally finding this film, like, that scene would have absolutely captivated you. Yeah, it's a whole load of fun. I think the actors are performing brilliantly. I agree with everything you just said. I will throw out the question, Dan.
Sure.
You know, to be a contrarian. Does the scene lessen when you know afterwards that they were aware and wanted it to happen and were actually pleased it was happening? Does that affect, like, the looks of terror when you look back in the very next scene? They're celebrating it as a victory because they wanted to be haunted to prove the house was haunted. Yes. Does the scene still work with what happens next?
It's a really good question, and it's something I did wonder. I've thought on it since watching it the other day, because it was the thought that came to me when I sat down to think about the film once I'd finished watching it. I think the reason they get away with it, for me, and I think this is subjective, and I would totally understand somebody feeling the opposite way, is I think the intention is that in the moment when they first are having their bodies controlled and they don't know what's happening immediately, that is very frightening. Suddenly to not be in control. But when it then ends with them just being sort of thrown to the floor by the shrimp things and they regain control, to them at that point, it's like, oh, what a great party trick. What a fun, like being on a roller coaster. Once you get off at the other end and you're safe and sound, you almost enjoy it. I say this actually, I imagine, because I don't do roller coasters, but I imagine the relief at the end of being like, you probably enjoy it more in hindsight than in the moment, right? People on a roller coaster are terrified as they're zipping around at all these high speeds. Once you get off it and you're safe and sound, like I imagine there's a lot of adrenaline still dumping and it's like a good thing. So my sort of reading of it doesn't necessarily change with that information so much as that once they hit the ground and we cut away, they then got up, stared at each other for a minute, and then realized, okay, we're back to normal, we're fine, and then all started laughing because now, retrospectively, that was actually ridiculous fun because it was fine. Didn't end anyone getting hurt. So it becomes a parlor trick, then it becomes like a thing to thing at a dinner party. That's kind of when they reframe it that way. But in the moment when their whole bodies, it could have ended with the ghosts like control. I mean, they wouldn't have done that because we know the characters of Adam and Barbara. But from their perspective, the ghosts could have made them do anything. If they can control their bodies like that, they could have made them kill themselves. They could have made them, jump off cliff. Like it's.
I think they from the previous haunting of putting sheets over their heads, and the fact that that's how they know they're there because they've got the photos and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think they have an impression of the ghosts that would mean they feel that's unlikely.
Right? Yeah, you could definitely argue that for sure. So for me, it still works because I kind of see it that way of like that the reason they have these brief flickers of like panic and confusion and fear. Is because that would be your immediate reaction to have your body taken over like that, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
No one on a roller coaster is, well, not no one, but like most people on a roller coaster are not like smiling and laughing as it's happening, are they? There's a lot of screaming for a reason, Yeah. So that's kind of how I viewed it. But so for me, it doesn't really detract from it. And I've just got to tell you, like, I gotta give the guys a little credit here. Like every member cast that's around that table that's doing the dancing, they really commit. Glenn Shaddix.
Oh yeah.
As Otho, Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara. I'm trying to think of who the other people who are at that table are. It's the boss, isn't it, or whatever.
Otto in general, the actor playing Otto is doing a great job because Otto, even now, the believability that someone rich would, essentially take their graphic designer with them and they'd move into the house and do it up. Like, now I think it's more believable and you'd kind of buy that more whilst still kind of going, oh, it's a little bit of a stretch. But, whenever this film was made, what, like 87 or something?
88, I think.
88? Like, I don't think that's not an idea that would be accessible to most people in 1988.
Yeah.
But the actor's charm,
yes,
I think, really pulls that off.
He absolutely steals many scenes he's in. There is something about the way he speaks and moves through these scenes with this confidence that's just utterly captivating. And very sadly, unfortunately, Glenn Shaddix, who played that character, did pass away in 2010.
Sorry to hear
which funnily enough, not funnily enough, I assume very deliberately chosen. At his memorial service, the last song they played was Deo, the Banana Boat song, which is the song used from this dinner party scene. So he was obviously very beloved. He had he had a great career where he got to do many great things. He was the voice of the mayor in The Night Before Christmas. He was in Heathers. He got to be in the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes movie, which is, sorry to hear that. no one wants to be in that. But he also got to be in Carnival.
Sounds like he basically worked with Tim Burton or Winona Ryder. He was very committed to their project.
Yeah, yeah.
Bless him. That's awesome.
He did a bunch of voice work because he has a great voice. So he had a great career. So hats off to him. As Kevin Smith would say on his podcast, Hollywood Babylon, big bucket of win. He had a great career. So he was very sadly taken too soon. Obviously, far too young to have passed. But I think he was 58. I think when he passed away. There's no good. But what an amazing performance he gives in this movie, and we'll come on to the performances in general now, I guess, because this is a good segue for that. But just highlighting him, that character, I think a lot of these characters would work in the hands of different actors. All the actors do a wonderful job, but there are 3 roles in this movie I feel like sing because of the performer behind them. One is Otho, the other is Delia, Catherine O'Hara, who just, God damn it, why didn't society know back then how good Catherine O'Hara is? She's getting award nominations and stuff now for Schitt's Creek, but it just feels like she did a bunch of parts where she just played the mum.
Yeah.
And it's so clear she's a genius. It's so clear
she's brilliant.
watching this movie that she's a genius. She got wasted as the mum in so many movies from this era, including Home Alone. Anyway.
Do you think that's just because Home Alone was so iconic?
Yeah, 100%. I understand how it happened, I guess. But, oh, man, we missed out. Because now they're letting her do other, more insane sort of evocative characters. And she's just, God, she's so good. There's a reason she got those Emmys for Schitt's Creek. Anyway, and then the other role, of course, that's absolutely scene stealing is Michael Keaton playing Beetlejuice, which we should now, I suppose, come on to, because as a character, he's got a kind of genie from Aladdin vibe, in that a lot of his lines feel kind of ad-libbed, which I've seen varying sources on whether they are or aren't ad-libbed. I know some lines for sure were, but the percentage of how much was ad-libbed varies wildly. I saw one piece of trivia that insisted it was 90%, which I think is probably false. It seems wrong.
Yeah, I can't. I struggle to imagine Tim Burton like. But then again, I mean, he relinquished control completely over Nightmare Before Christmas, so maybe. But I feel like it's all so deliberate and defined. Like,
right.
I struggle to imagine it wasn't scripted. Well, the 90% of it wasn't, anyway.
Yeah, it does have a very ad-libby vibe, so maybe he definitely did throw in random lines, for sure, like just in the moment. There's one I know for sure was ad-libbed specifically. We'll come to that when we get to the trivia, because it's quite a good one and the context is quite funny. But 90%, I don't reckon that's right. I suspect it was, I think at best 50-50, but even then I still think it probably lent in favour of scripted stuff. But maybe that's just me being very, maybe that's Michael Keaton's an absolute genius and did ad-lib most of his lines, and he's so good at that, I'm going, nah, surely not. This must have been on the page. I'd be curious to get my hands on a shooting script, actually, and have a look and see how much of it is there. But the problem with that is, with the old movies, you try to find a shooting script, what you end up finding is a transcript of the finished film, which is not the same thing, obviously. What you want is the script they took to set before they started filming things, and that is sometimes difficult to find for older movies. These days, you can...
Yeah, I always think one of the biggest cons at conventions is when you get scripts that are just transcripts, and like they've got some like scanned autographs on the front cover. When you can get hold of, like you say, original scripts or first drafts or even shooting scripts, great. But often it's just a transcript of the movie.
Yeah. That's why when I was younger, I had a friend's book that had the script for the wedding episodes, the London ones that did that 2-parter, and it had not maybe the first draft, but a reasonably early draft that had a completely different. Like Phoebe had this weird subplot about puppets. It was very strange. I think she was entertaining herself while they were away by making puppets and talking to them. It was weird, but you know, I loved that because it was like not the thing I'd seen. You know, so I'd be curious to get hold of the shooting script to see how close it is to what finally came out in terms of particularly Beetlejuice's dialogue. But holy hell, does he give the performance all the welly? Like he just the credit to the man for just being like, okay, if I'm going to do this, and I'll tell you now, he was reluctant to do this. He had to be talked round, as many of the actors did, because a lot of people read the script and, you know, simply didn't get it. The fact that once he got to set and was hired and was doing it, he just fully committed. Incredible. And I don't know how you even go about creating that character and that tone that character has.
No, it's an incredibly, because I think what's so amazing about it, you know, a bit like, I think the kind of anarchist version
anarchic.
Anarchist, that's how you say
word?
it. Anarchist version of the genie is a great way of phrasing it. And I think, like Robin Williams' performance as the genie, it is off the rails and all over the place, but very refined and very within its own rules and very almost logical, like kind of like the Doctor in a way. Like they've got to say these crazy things and do these crazy actions, but it wouldn't work if it was just that. There's almost, and it's in the writing as well, there's almost always a logic to the madness, which makes it very captivating.
There's an internal logic. When he's behaving strangely, it's usually for a reason. It's not like completely arbitrary. He's not just like he's not off the rails in the sense where his character doesn't have any sort of internal logic that and
it's never frustrating
consistently.
I can't name any now off the top of my head, but there are movies where they've got characters like this that just become frustrating because it's too much, you know. Whereas this walks a great line. Obviously, the genie does. Drop Dead Fred walks a great line, you know. And I think it's at its heart is performers that can do it. Do you know what I mean? Like Jim Carrey's a little hit and miss. There are some Jim Carrey performances where maybe it goes too far the other way. I guess maybe that's an example of what I'm trying to pinpoint down. What I'm saying is I think it's a lot harder than it looks. Is
the solution to that giving the character... I'm thinking about the examples you just listed, and that one of the consistent things I noticed is that they give the characters pretty good motivations, pretty clear. It's like, okay, if you're going to have a character that behaves anarchically, then their motivations need to be crystal clear. The genie in Aladdin wants to be free. He's been trapped for thousands of years, and he's entertaining himself by acting bizarrely wherever he can. He has the power to literally make himself look like a reference that doesn't make sense to anyone but him in Jack Nicholson or whoever impression he does, you know, which, you know, anachronistic as they are quite fun. You know, but the character, ultimately, that we always understand what it is they want in every scene, because what they want in every scene is the same thing. Now, Beetlejuice wants to be free of the bureaucracy of... He obviously felt very restricted by the bureaucracy of the afterlife, which is one of the funny things about this movie, is they present the afterlife as being quite boring and mundane, and take a ticket, sit down in the waiting room. You know, that's death, apparently. And that's kind of fun in itself. It's almost very like a Terry Gilliam-like version of death. I kind of love that vibe. I think that's fun. But the idea that he wanted to break away from that and has gone sort of freelance, but you know, but he takes it too far because of his personality. He's got a pretty clear motive in every scene. He's trying to convince Adam and Barbara to hire him so he can be free enough to, you know, being summoned to go and cause some. In that case, I don't know. I just feel like he's a pretty clearly. He's a very simply motivated character. Don't get me wrong. He's not a very complex character, but he's very clearly motivated in every scene he's in. Is that how you do create a through line that anchors a character down like that and stops him from feeling completely off the rails?
Yeah, I think so. I think generally there's also, and this is why Michael Keaton's performance is so effective. Often those roles work because they are playing against nothing but straight men, as in not sexual persuasion, as in like down to earth
the comedic straight man.
The comedic straight man. Whereas in this movie, no one's really a straight man because the whole world is so bizarre, and you can't say yes, Adam and Barbara are slightly calmer than Beetlejuice, but they are also turning their heads into pterodactyls. They have accepted death quite easily, and just been like, oh well, we must be dead. Winona Ryder's character becomes kind of the comedic straight man, but again, at the beginning, she's stroking the walls and she can see ghosts and stuff like that. So when she strokes the walls and it's like, I could live here, and again, another stunning performance, by the way.
Shit. Oh,
so
yeah,
I think
we need to talk about Winona Ryder in a minute because I just holy hell.
So Adam, why do I keep saying Adam Keaton? Michael
because
Keaton
because the lead character is Adam, I think, is why that's in your head.
I think that's it. So Michael Keaton is really it's I think in the hands of the wrong actor, like the Beetlejuice character falls apart. And Michael Keaton does a great job of avoiding that. But I imagine it was a struggle. I can see why he was nervous.
Yeah. Yeah,
Without doubt.
It's. I mean, I think if I've got the quote here, I think he literally just said, "I don't get it." I think he just was really. By the way, if you ever get, and this is for anyone, you included, Chris, but it's just for anyone. If you ever get a chance to just find a Michael Keaton interview and listen to what he's like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it is
such an interesting man. And he's just like, yeah, whatever, it's all groovy, I'm there, man. I don't know, he's got this vibe that I just love. He either just like, he's so committed or he's just not at all. He's like the most casual human on the planet. And I just love the idea of a person who has like essentially an intensity switch. That he could just go, right, now I'm in, click, and then he's just like, Beetlejuice, like he's just there. Yeah. And then he gets upset and he's like, yeah, groovy, man, I just, I didn't get it, but then Tim Burton told me it was going to be interesting, and then I got really fucking into it. So yeah, just find interviews with Michael Keaton. He is a fascinating human being. I'm forever interested in Michael Keaton. But yeah, like very quickly, Winona Ryder has to sell a whole lot in this movie, from like sort of almost sweet and innocent, but also like, a bit Wednesday Addams, which is a lot to sell. And she has to sell, let me tell you, she takes one of the worst lines of dialogue in this movie and makes it one of the best. Pure delivery. You put the line on paper and it is dog shit, and I don't know why anyone ever wrote the line down. It's so try hard, it's too much, it doesn't work, it's new, bad. But she delivers it, and it's captivating. And the line in question is when she's just read the handbook, and she says, I've read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live live people ignore the strange and unusual. She pauses, then she goes, I myself am strange and unusual.
I don't think that's that bad a line.
Fucking hell. That is a terrible line.
I've read worse in scripts written by you and I.
True. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. We've definitely written worse dialogue than that. But, like, yeah, it's a bad line. But fuck me, does she sell it?
Yeah, no. She's,
like, objectively, that's bad dialogue, but holy hell. It's so good in the delivery, and it actually, like, it's kind of iconic. Like, again, her delivery of that line is iconic. Tim Burton is a bit of a master of iconography, isn't he? He sort of understands how to make something iconic. Like, I always think back to that shot from his Batman movie where the Batwing flies up and lines up with the moon, so it almost creates the Batman symbol in the sky. Like, you're never forgetting that image. That'll be burnt into your brain till the day you die. The penguin from the second one burnt into the brain. Night Before Christmas, that twisty hill that stretches out as Jack Skellington walks down it, that's not an image that's leaving your brain. Like, ever. It's just, he's just got a real... Beetlejuice is a big snake thing. Incredible.
Yeah.
I even remembered the visual of the fireplace turning into the altar from the end of the movie. Like, exactly correctly. There's something about what he does.
Oh, yeah. Visually, it's stunning. Like, we'll talk about that. I just want to say one last thing about Winona Ryder.
Oh, yeah,
That's
sure.
another good example where, and she's the, this is her performance, because I think her performance is doing it as well, but they also do a great job of like making her look less and less gothic throughout the film. Like,
Right.
you think about her introduction, she's wearing gloves, her hair's tied up, she's covered in black, to the end, where she's got more light colours, her face is a bit more visible.
Yeah.
And that happens throughout the movie, which I kind of am conflicted about, because on the one hand, I'm like, that's a really great subtle visual cue and shows that someone has really thought about this. And again, her performance changes as well alongside that change. Mm-hmm. But equally, again, it's going, look at the impact that they're having on this girl without ever actually seeing the justification for that impact.
This is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It backs that up as well.
Yeah, because it's like they're doing all the subtle work to hint at character stuff without doing the full legwork. So normally those little details, and the movie is full of great details, would support wider character work. But in this, they're kind of in place of it, and that just doesn't function for me. So while I think the movie is really great, I have such an absolute blast watching it, I have to acknowledge that from a character perspective, and character is king, I've said this many a time, it does kind of let itself down. I do think it doesn't support its own ideas in many ways. It's too interested in its wacky world and all the other stuff, which is all done so well, that it does drop the ball a bit on the character arcs. And the worst part is, it's a reasonably brisk movie. It's like an hour and a half or whatever, hour and 20-odd minutes. It wouldn't take much to fix that. You add maybe 5 minutes screen time, 10 minutes, maybe most. The movie wouldn't feel a lot longer because it's already very brisk. And I think you'd be more invested in the other stuff, because the more you care about the characters, the more you care about the outcome and what happens to them. The ending sequence is quite haunting. When Barbara and Adam are getting sort of exercised, essentially. But it's haunting because they sell it with the visuals, right? They make them look extremely frail, and it's a very upsetting image. Those two in their wedding outfits, gaunt, fading away to dust, really is a very effective, and we need to talk about this in a minute as well. The practical effects in general are just spectacular in this movie. Of a lot of the movies we've watched for this is one of the older ones. Like, I think, so I'm trying to think. We did a couple. Oh no, to be fair, we did Lady and the Tramp, which is pretty old, but that was just an animated movie, and then we had Italian Job, which is like what, 50s, 60s. So like.
Yeah, but none of those. This is probably the oldest. Well, apart from Star Wars, the oldest heavy visual effect film we've seen. I think,
and the choice which obviously isn't a choice back then. It was just how you did things. But the effective use of the practical effects is incredible throughout this movie, and they really sell Adam and Barbara sort of like weakness, and obviously also great acting, because the sort of sad look Barbara gives Adam right before it looks like it's going to go very badly for them is incredible. Again, Gina Davis, another performer we need to highlight here. Alec Baldwin's in this movie too, and he's there, just for anyone who's wondering. he's present.
He's all right, isn't it?
What's funny is I remember, so when the movie finished, I kind of, we were talking about it, I think I don't know if I said this out loud necessarily, but like one of the things I was thinking about when the movie finished was like how he's kind of like, in a movie full of people doing incredible things, he's just kind of fine. Like he does exactly what the role requires of him, but that's, you're going to suffer in terms of the viewer's perspective of you. Next to everyone else being incredible, right? Captain O'Hara, the guy who played Arthur, Glenn. What was his surname? Glenn something. Glenn something. I'll find his name out again in a second. You're gonna stand. And then I went through the trivia, and one of the things in the trivia, I don't know if I put it in my final trivia, but Glenn Shaddix. One of the things I saw in the trivia was that he wasn't happy with his performance in this movie, and to this day isn't particularly fond of it.
Oh wow! Well, Alec Baldwin.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, right.
There were moments in this movie I
expected
expected him to turn around and start yelling at Liz Lemon, and I was disappointed, and that didn't happen.
That's the way. I think that's more. I don't think the character's brilliantly written, because again, he
doesn't have a lot to work with, does he? He is the closest thing the movie has to a straight man.
It's them going, he likes models, and it's like, that's not a character trait. Like, that's just something the guy's into. Like, and it sort of passes that as character. I'm conscious just because I want to get Luke back to, because we sort of teased the visuals a lot and we got distracted by Alec Baldwin there. But side note on things, because I've looked it up. Little Shop of Horrors is earlier than this film. And
that did have 86. That had incredible practical effects, like the way they made that plant sing. Yeah.
One, it's amazing how many of your choices are like sort of imaginative. Joe's Apartment, Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah,
like this, you could really draw a line.
But even Gremlins. Like I clearly like really weird stuff as a kid. Like Night Before Christmas as well. Like I clearly latched on to the really imaginative, not very of this world. I clearly lent into escapism. I mean, it's almost bizarre that I enjoyed Quick Change as much as I did, because Quick Change is about 3 people who've robbed a bank trying to escape New York, and it's quite grounded, really, in comparison.
I took a lot of shit last episode about like this movie no one's heard of and aware of, and when you said Quick Change earlier, I was like, it's more well known than Quick Change because of the Razzies and stuff.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I don't
think. Sure.
I think we would struggle. I've maybe got one choice we could do that's more obscure.
I made it clear when we reviewed Quick Change that no one had heard of that movie. It was just one I had. I was under no illusions with Quick Change being a really obscure pick.
Visually, all the visuals hold up, and I think that's partly because of their consistency. There's a slight difference in visual style, I think, when they're kind of, between like the desert and the real world, but I think that's probably, again, deliberate. I think what's so impressive about the visuals is it is potentially more than any other movie we've reviewed, potentially more than any other movie, or at least, in the top 20 of films doing this thing. It's a live action comic book movie. Like, it feels, the scenes at the end, like, where we kind of, when we get the payoff of Beetlejuice, and he turns those other 2 people into, like, fairground attractions, and himself into a fairground attraction, and he does the hammer and stuff like that. Like, it's really effective visual, live-action cartoon-style visuals that work really well with the imagination and the altered nature of Tim Burton. Like, it's great.
Yeah, and I think, so I think we tangented, like, we went 4 levels. We inceptioned our thoughts, though, because I was talking about the character stuff, then I got sucked into the visuals, and then we got sucked into Adam Baldwin. All very strange. This is what happens. We need to stop doing these so early in the morning, Chris, because clearly my brain doesn't function the same way. For those listening, my alarm went off at 7 a.m. for me to record this, and I finished work last night at about 11:30. I wasn't home until nearly 1 a.m. So this was not a good idea. So sorry for the inception sort of levels of. So looping back to because the visuals for sure. I agree with everything you just said. Basically, I don't want to really reiterate it because I don't have anything to add necessarily to what you just said. So going back, I think you're right. It's endemic of, like, from a character perspective. The stuff you were talking about with Lydia is the same problem, because in that scene at the end. Wait, that's because I was talking about the end scene for that reason. I was talking about. Oh yeah, you'd be more invested in the stakes if they'd taken that extra 5-10 minutes I was talking about to actually engage us more with these characters. It wouldn't have taken a lot to fix that problem in the film for me. It really didn't need because again, they've done all the weird subtle hints and references, so why not build in the proper stuff? Just a couple more scenes of the characters talking to help us establish that. Still scratching my head as to why those scenes aren't in this movie. It just so easily done. And it really, I'm not talking about a lot of the movie. Give me 5 minutes more, and I'm infinitely more invested in the final scene, in the final sequence. Let's talk about, while we're on that subject, Beetlejuice wants to marry the child. That's weird and icky. And then there's a lot of him attempting to grab at. Now,
he's looking under skirts and
he is. He basically one of my favorite, not subtle but like sort of understated jokes in the movie is so the joke that's not understated is the initial gag, which is Beetlejuice creates a whorehouse for himself in the model. Which is funny in itself, but the joke that gets me is when they pull out of that, and Adam is just like, "I didn't build that."
When she's like, "Why does this exist?" And he's like, "I didn't do it."
It's great. It's really good. But so he builds himself a whorehouse. Beetlejuice. He's looking up skirts. I don't know, Chris. I mean, he's not the hero. The movie acts as though he's behaving inappropriately, but it's worth noting the movie doesn't condemn him and his behaviors as strongly as maybe it should.
Yeah,
is that the problem?
Yeah, but like you say, it equally isn't. He's also not the hero. Like it's not aged well. It's not good. It's inappropriate. But it isn't as bad as I've seen it in other films. Like, it doesn't idolize him doing it. The characters all are not okay with him doing it. Like, they perhaps don't reprimand him as much as they should.
For sure.
But he isn't. He is the villain. Like, so, it is played more problematic than other storylines in other films.
And I think, I think that's another easily solved one, isn't it? I think that the characters just reacting more strongly to his behaviours would fix it. But of course, hard for us to sort of, throw in a criticism like that at a movie from the 80s. Unfortunately, people thought differently back then.
But it is in the if Harry Potter wasn't a children's book, Peeves would be doing exactly the same stuff.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It is the I'm not defending it. Like I don't think it would happen if the movie. I think someone would go, if we're going to do this, like people need to really react. And obviously, I'm talking specifically about trying to peek up Barbara and Catherine O'Hara's skirts here. I'm not talking about marrying a child. That should go and should be. There should absolutely be more shock at that in particular. That
was going to be my next. That was going to be my next question. Was the marriage element specifically? Because I mean, the character's age is never stated, but she's clearly going to school. And they clearly, at one point, Barbara's character just says, "I'm not going to which, by the way, is one of the movie's acknowledgements of Beetlejuice being weirdly problematic, which feels like such a horror. I'm almost with the right wing people right now. These bloody lefty snowflakes. Oh, Beetlejuice is problematic. I'm almost with you, right wing people, because it is a ridiculous sentence to speak. But the movie almost acknowledges that when it has Barbara say, "I'm not going to send him into that house with that little girl." And I think that's even where she uses the line "little girl." But drawing the line between Beetlejuice and the little girl in that moment, and then having him trying to marry her later. Yeah, I understand the horror of that is supposed to be that it's like child bride that's not appropriate, but like. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's
bad. It's
what
bad.
Is otherwise a pretty family-friendly. Because I suspect, Chris, last week when I said I'm acknowledging it's Halloween, let's do a Beetlejuice episode, or well, let's do an episode, and then I said I'm going to do Beetlejuice. When I first said Halloween, you probably imagined I was going to make you watch an actual horror film, full on like.
Yeah, I thought we were going Halloween or Friday 13th,
right? Which definitely crossed my mind, but I just thought I think the baseline, like the ideal choices for these are usually. I think we have a lot of fun when we do the family movies on here, and we just done all about Steve, and I really wanted to reset. As fun as it is to occasionally branch out into other stuff, I wanted something a lot more fun. But with that said, like, you know, the movie is family friendly, but that isn't as an idea. It's upsetting. And I even remember as a kid not feeling great about that.
Yeah, it's very upsetting.
I don't think it was necessarily when I was a kid necessarily the age thing as much. But the idea of this sort of innocent character, this character that was presented as innocent being forced to marry this other character, was upsetting to me. Because obviously when you're a kid, like, the age difference like that doesn't really, like, it's not the first thing that comes to your mind because you are a child. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's hard to comprehend that distance. Like, so maybe I did, but I don't think that particularly stood out to me.
It's horrific. And I don't think that, again, the true horror of it is not demonstrated by her parents. Like, that doesn't help. Like, they're not reacting strong enough, I don't think. Only sort of Barbara is, by this amazing moment, you know, where and again, a really good example of the script really working for this film. You know, the solution, Chekhov's gun, the solution has been embedded earlier in the movie in a way that in that scene plays as a threat to them, doesn't play at all as a setup for resolution at the end. But, you know, is there, so you understand it, and it's surprising, and it just works really effectively. But you don't, other than Barbara, I don't think you see enough horror in my memory. I'll flick back to it now, but yeah, there's not enough. Well, I suppose they're captured. Maybe he shouldn't, because, you know, they're covered in, like, the snakes, aren't they, and unable to talk and stuff. So maybe they shouldn't have done that, so you could really see and experience their horror. But I think that's part of it. That's why it plays even worse, because the audience, the characters on screen are not reacting in the way that we as an audience are reacting to this. Happening.
I think that's exactly right. I think that would have helped sell it, because that then firmly puts the movie as objecting not just to the forced marriage but the horror of the age thing too. Whereas I feel like now it just plays like, oh, he's a bad guy and he's marrying someone who doesn't want to marry him. Like, that's why he's a bad guy. But actually, someone yelling, she's a child, would actually probably, while... it's a frustrating one, though, because for what is essentially a family movie, I guess it's... Actually, I don't even know. Is this a family movie? I guess it deals with a lot of death and there's people who've committed suicide and stuff. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, maybe my because I've seen a lot of horror, maybe I'm just skewed on this. What rating was this movie?
I think it's one of those things where it's slightly up to the parents' judgment on whether it's a family movie or not, like, because it's one of those things where...
No, it's a 15. Okay, fuck it. Like,
it's a 15?
It's a 15. Yeah, there's people with throats cut and wrists cut, like...
Oh, I agree with it being a 15, but I'm just aware of so many people that watched it before they were 15.
Dude, like, me? I would have been... I couldn't have been older than 10.
But it's like the references to self-harm you probably weren't looking at, and there is...
Right.
It's a 15, I think, because there are a series of horrific, grisly images, but there's not, like, necessarily a lot of foul language or anything like that, I suppose.
Yeah, I can't believe that. In my head, I guess I'm just desensitized because I've seen so many sort of much more horror films that, to me, this is a family-friendly horror film. It's a 15 when it came out. That's crazy.
I'm watching the scene now. Like, the dad's not... Like, Catherine O'Hara's mouth is covered up. The dad's isn't. Like, the dad could yell and be like, this is messed up. Like, they're even trying to stop them saying it Beetlejuice, aren't they? I don't know. Is it saying 3 times it reverses it or something? But he puts
say it 3 times. It would trap him back in the. He'd probably go back to the model, I presume.
So why doesn't has the dad not picked this up? Like,
I guess not. He's been pretty oblivious the whole movie, hasn't he? To be fair.
Well, yeah, that's true.
he doesn't really know much about what's going on.
But like Barbara goes to say it, gets her mouth covered, goes to say it again, gets her mouth covered by metal, not just a zip. Like, the clues are there, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, the zip. That's such an... that image is really... I found that upsetting.
Oh, it's difficult in a way because, like, there's... Other than these visuals are spellbinding, it's hard to... Do you know what I mean?
Could... Like, there's 1,000 things in this movie visually that we've not even touched upon that I could describe to the audience as being really, like, incredibly done, but it just doesn't sell it as well. Chris, have you bought your bus ticket?
Yeah, man. I've got it. I've got it here.
Because we're taking a trip to Nitpick Corner.
Oh, can't wait.
And I'll be honest with you, Chris. This is the most petty nitpick, the most insubstantial, unimportant detail ever. But it bothered the shit out of me.
Hit me with it.
So, one of the coolest elements of this movie is that he's got this model of the town, and Beetlejuice exists in it in sort of in the correct scale. So you've got these incredible sets. That are made to look fake and plastic on purpose, right? And it allows them to do a lot of really neat stuff visually. And there's a point when Barbara and Adam are pulled into the model and are basically given shovels to dig up Beetlejuice. The visual of them starting to dig up, they initially just dig up the sort of plastic layer that's fake grass, and then they start digging up cardboard.
Mm-hmm.
The cardboard boxes say things like fragile and stuff, and they're all torn up. And I think you would gloss over that. Oh yeah, cardboard boxes, that makes sense. It would be made of bits of cardboard underneath to give it sort of weight, sure. But then you go, wait a minute. The word fragile on that cardboard is to scale for Adam and Barbara now. Like that, you can clearly read. If you tore up a giant what would be a giant cardboard box for them, you wouldn't be able to read the words, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
So did he make miniature tiny cardboard boxes, then chop them up to make the underside of the fucking model?
I mean, a whorehouse appears on it, doesn't it? Like, it's very much a nitpick, isn't it? Like you say. But yes, I do agree.
That is the most nitpick we've ever done, but it bothered the fuck out of me. Because
but that is one of
those
those things
breaks the logic of the entire model.
But again, Beetlejuice could have done that, couldn't he?
For what reason? To annoy me? Is that Beetlejuice's way of pissing me off?
He also didn't bury Beetlejuice when he made the model.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Are we about ready to triv it up, Dan?
Let me just see. Let me just double check that I didn't write anything else down that we haven't talked about. I'm sure we have though. We talked about how it's a masterclass in keeping a character off screen as much as possible to give the screen time weight. We've covered that. The Deo scene, the special effects. Yeah, no, we covered it all. Okay, let's triv it up, as you'd say.
It's so crazy to me, just again quickly, that it's a 15, because I think the ideal age to watch this movie is 8, 9.
I think it's probably closer to 10, 11 maybe. I think 8, 9 might be a little too young. You might be too I think the average 8, 9-year-old might be a little scared of this movie, and all this the suicide references might not be too great. But yeah, I think I think an 11, 12-year-old would fucking love this movie.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you, I don't know. Do you disagree?
I don't know enough about what age is aware to properly make a judgment call on it. Ask me when I've got children.
I definitely saw it when I couldn't have been older than 10. So I'm in the bracket you've referred to for sure. So I guess maybe you're right. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's have a look at the trivia. So according to Tim Burton, it took a lot of time to convince cast members to sign on, as everyone thought the script was a bit too weird. Dustin Hoffman, Robin Williams, Christopher Lloyd, Jim Carrey, Tim Curry, Jack Nicholson, Bill Murray, Robert De Niro, and John Cleese were all considered to play Beetlejuice. At one point, Tim Burton even considered Arnold Schwarzenegger. However...
I was going to say, all of those choices would have been great until, obviously, you said Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. Yeah, no, correct. All of those choices prior to the name Arnold Schwarzenegger all would have brought something particularly interesting to the role, and I would have liked to have... If I had Rick Sanchez's portal gun and could go to alternate realities, I would quite gladly pop to a few alternate realities to see alternate versions of this casting. I think that'd be good fun. I'd love to see what someone like Bill Murray might have done with the role, or Jim Carrey, or even one of the more interesting ones for me there, I thought John Cleese, who I just really, that one, I was like, really? It kind of stood out to me, but yeah. Arnold Schwarzenegger is also one I would want to see, but for different reasons. Apparently the Geffen...
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, as much as we're like, oh god, that's a terrible choice, in a portal gun scenario, that's the version you're watching. Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, you're right. I'm going to the reality where Arnold Schwarzenegger played Beetlejuice. But apparently, so Tim Burton was really fond of this idea of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he apparently was told by the Geffen company that they didn't think his sort of reputation. And this is what I love about this, by the way, is that they're correct. He's wrong for the role, but their reasoning isn't the reason. Right. They thought that he was too known as an action star, and people wouldn't take it seriously. That was their logic for not wanting Arnold Schwarzenegger.
They didn't know what movie they were making.
They really didn't.
About people taking it seriously.
I agree. I absolutely agree. It's interesting, actually. The Geffen Company were responsible, I think, for Little Shop of Horrors. So there's a theme running there. Burton approached Schwarzenegger anyway, but unfortunately he had to turn it down in the end because he was busy shooting The Running Man. So I'd like to thank the director of The Running Man for choosing Arnold Schwarzenegger and the correct dates to make sure he couldn't do Beetlejuice.
Yeah, definitely.
So, because the movie in the 80s, Kirstie Alley was, of course, considered for the role of Barbara. Kirstie Alley considered for all female roles in the 80s.
Can I just say, sorry, something else on Arnold? Because not only, because I think, all joking aside, we've played it on the, was Arnold as good an actor as Michael Keaton to do it? Well, I mean, that's not even a question, no. But also, a lot of the criticisms we've had, the marrying Winona Ryder's character at the end, all of those things are worse if it's Arnold because he's such a threatening presence. He was so
right.
bulky and muscly. All of those things are suddenly inherently even creepier when you've got someone as physically dominating as Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I didn't even think of that, but you're absolutely correct.
So maybe I don't want to watch that version.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So as was law at the time, Kirstie Alley had to be considered for the role because it was a movie in the 80s. But they couldn't let her out of... She was even wanted to do it, but they couldn't get her out of the contract. She was still on Cheers at the time. So she had to pass. And again, more excellent 80s actresses were considered. Sigourney Weaver, Lyndall Hamilton, Goldie Hawn, Laura Dern, Linda Blair. These people were all considered for the role. In fact, it was Gina Davis was... I mean, a lot of them seem to have just passed on the project for the same reason that Michael Keaton initially did, which is that he just thought it was too weird or whatever. Gina Davis was actually the only initial cast member who committed to the project without first passing. Because Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, and Sylvia Sidney, who we haven't talked about, but she plays Juno, their sort of caseworker, she's wonderful in this movie. We haven't really talked about her, but Sylvia Sidney does a great job. It's a really, really fun character she's brought to life. Kind of Estelle from Friends-esque, if anyone knows that anyone understands that reference. Presumably a lot of people. Friends is apparently quite popular. They all said no at least once. So that's Keaton, Ryder, O'Hara, and Sidney all said no at least once, with Keaton apparently admitting he just didn't get it. And it was actually producer David Geffen that convinced Michael Keaton's manager to meet with Burton. According to Keaton, the Beetlejuice character was sort of described to him by Tim Burton as having lived in every time period which interested him, and sort of he jumped on that because he liked the idea of creating a character with like an anachronistic costume. And it was actually Keaton that came in with the idea of giving him the sort of shock hairdo, you know, where his hair is all up. And the idea of him living kind of for so long gave him the idea of having the mold makeup and the large teeth, and like, you know, apparently when he first showed up to the set in costume, the crew were apparently chanting "juice, juice, juice," which apparently got him very excited for the film. So it took basically sitting down with Tim Burton to convince him to do it. And once Keaton had said yes, Burton realised that a personal approach was definitely going to be the way to cast this movie. So that's when he actually personally called Sydney and begged her to do the movie, and then he flew out to actually meet Catherine O'Hara to convince her. Which is
the Gina Davis thing. I was going to make a joke and be like, well, of course she said yes. She'd only done 4 movies before this, but 3 of those 4 movies were Tootsie, Fletch, and The Fly.
Right.
So she'd been in some big movies.
Yeah. Gina Davis is like, you know, I make that joke about like 80s actresses, but a lot of these actresses like have continued to do things. Gina Davis is like, she's only recently sort of it feels like, I don't know what happens. Like she must have pissed someone off, got herself blacklisted, I don't know, something. Oh, you're kidding. Oh, my laptop's just died. Not now.
She's consistently worked, but just not necessarily big things.
Oh, my laptop's just
movie
died.
Wise. That's all right. Your mic's still going. That's all right. Oh
yeah,
no,
trivia.
You got the triv.
Oh wait,
you got the triv
my
on
phone.
there.
My triv's on my phone. I can get it on my phone. 1 sec.
She also, Dan, did the. She was Mrs. Eleanor Little in Stuart Little.
Mm-hmm. And then more recently, she was in Glow, which she was very good in.
That would have, yeah. But what I'm saying is, you think, you know, she wasn't that well known for a period. I imagine Stuart Little kept that sweet Stuart Little money, kept the lights on.
Yeah, that's how Hugh Laurie bought his second house.
Really, Stuart Little money?
No, it was a joke. Yeah. I love that for a second you bought that, though. All right, I've got my laptop working again, just about. Oh, dear Lord. Right, but I've got my phone anyway. I'm going to use my phone. So if anyone hears any, like, it's because I'm now having to hold my phone closer than normal. I'm holding it at a distance, but it has to be close enough for me to read. Oh, my glasses will probably help in this scenario. 1 second. Here we go. Oh, I feel like an old man. There we go. Right. Where was I in the notes? I'm going to re-find where I was, because obviously I'm now on a different device. So casting Lydia came down to just 2 actresses, namely Winona Ryder and Alyssa Milano. Looking at this, it doesn't have any. I couldn't find any details of what the deciding factor was. I guess they just both auditioned, and eventually Burton chose Winona Ryder. There's not as much information about her sort of turning it down first, which was part of the previous piece of trivia, so I don't really understand. Michael Keaton only appears for 14.5 minutes in the film.
Wow. That is less than I would have guessed. And obviously I've talked a lot about how I was surprised by that, but even that is less than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? I'm kind of surprised.
Wow.
He only spent 2 weeks filming. So no wonder he's quite happy to come back at some point to do Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, because he's like, 2 weeks of my life. Yeah, go on. How many million?
I don't think there's a good... It's really easy to do a sequel to this. Like, you just do another... You do another scenario. Like, you do another couple. You do another whatever. And you even could have plays on, like, the modern stuff and how that's affected... How the modern world has affected ghosts and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, I reckon there's a good sequel in there. But I don't think you should do it. Like, and I think that the second one would be too much about Beetlejuice, because of course it would be, because that's the thing that worked in the first one, and they wouldn't be able to resist casting Winona Ryder. Like, and yeah, I don't think they should do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you're right. Yeah, I think there's a choice that needs to be made there, isn't there? About like the way that, yeah, because the temptation would be to bring all the cast back, but you really shouldn't. The smartest idea would be to create a new scenario where someone a new character or characters become ghosts, and their situation requires them to be tempted to call in Beetlejuice and bad consequences. You know, you'd almost redo this movie, but you'd find a new angle that way. In the words of Kevin Smith, must he go tropical?
Yeah.
It's also worth noting, by the way, for those who are going, why haven't you mentioned this yet? I'm aware there is the animated series, the kids show from the 90s or late 80s maybe. It's weird because it kind of ignores all of the movie, and it makes Lydia and Beetlejuice out to be sort of like friends that adventure around in the ghost world and stuff. It's a strange movie a strange show that mostly ignores the movie's existence, with just a few passing references in terms of like design and, you know, characters. It's pretty weird. It's worth anyone just looking it up on YouTube and watching a few scenes from it, because it is a strange show.
Yeah, which is what I did, and I was like, this is weird. But then it felt like when I saw clips of the Mask TV show or the Ace Ventura cartoon. Do you know what I mean? It didn't feel any weirder than them. So
I loved both those cartoons. The Mask one particularly I thought was great. Anyway, the studio wanted to call the film House Ghosts. Tim Burton did not like this title, and as a joke suggested if they're going to do that, they should name it Scared Sheetless, and then was horrified when the studio actually considered using it.
I mean, 14 minutes of screen time. House Ghost is a more fitting title at the very least.
That's fair. Although the character's true name is it's Beetlejuice, but spelled Betelgeuse. In the title, it's spelt Beetlejuice, as in a beetle and the juice, because basically it markets better and is more easily pronounced at a glance. In the movie you see it's spelt differently. The way it's spelt is actually because his name comes from. I think I read this. It's a star in our not solar system, in our galaxy. Apparently, it's the 10th brightest star, and it's called Beetlejuice. But it's spelt the way that it's spelt when you see it written down in the movie. Nadia has a theory that it was going to be spelt Beetlejuice when the movie was being made, like even in the title, and it was more of a last minute thing because it's written in the movie a bunch of times and it's always spelt differently. There is I think Nadia's probably right on that. I really do. Yeah, I think so too, because otherwise you would just spell it that way for everything, wouldn't you? The funny thing, though, is there is a bit of a fan theory, a fan explanation as to why it's spelt differently. Apparently, people think it's often intentionally misspelled because Beetlejuice doesn't want to be summoned by every person that happens upon his name unintentionally and says it 3 times, attempting to pronounce it. The Maitlands only learn how to correctly pronounce it once he broadcasts the commercial specifically to them. So the theory is that it's like intentionally difficult to pronounce because he doesn't want anyone who sees it to just repeat it 3 times and then summon him. That's a bit of a stretch, but it makes sense.
Yeah, especially when his main character motivation is escaping.
Right, yes. This
feels
correct.
Like a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
The original plan for the dinner party was for the guests to dance to a song by the Ink Spots. I've Googled it and Googled it and Googled it. I couldn't find out which song, so I can't comment on whether it would have been better. I flicked through a bunch of different Ink Spots songs. There are some really good ones, some ones that wouldn't have fit. I don't know which one they would have chose, but apparently it was Catherine O'Hara that suggested the music be Calypso, the the Deo song.
The song they chose is so good, let's assume it wouldn't have worked as well.
Yeah, that's fair. Tim Burton apparently feared that entire Deo sequence wouldn't go over well. In his opinion, he didn't think it turned out very funny, and he turned out to be very wrong. Audiences obviously loved the scene, and it is one of the film's most iconic. This blew my mind, Chris. The film's visual effects budget was just $1 million.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
That's
nuts.
That's so little.
Jesus.
The more I think about that, the more insane that is, because it is a special effects heavy movie. Yeah. So apparently, this reduced budget on the special effects was actually the reason that sort of Tim Burton decided to lean into sort of the B movie element, because he kind of figured if you make it kind of B-movie-y in terms of its special effects, you'll get away with it a bit more if it feels more intentional, and you don't have to spend as much money that way. And he was very correct. Like, I think it holds up really well. And I think
it does. And it's interesting because I didn't even, from my point of view, it's like, is it B-movie? Is it just old? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I didn't even... Now, in a modern context, I didn't even think of it as a B movie. I just thought of it as an older movie.
Right. Yeah. But in its time, I guess it was kind of, kind of echoing some of the older movies and the approach to special effects. So all the people in the waiting room are in the same condition as when they died, shown clearly, except for the Maitlands, who drowned and are not wet. Apparently, Tim Burton felt that keeping the actors wet all the time throughout the movie would be too uncomfortable for them. Which is fair. There's been stories from movie sets of actors like getting like hypothermia and other illnesses from like too much like makeup that covers whole body.
I think if you're going to make a decision like that, though, for the comfort of the cast, have them die a different way.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, just have the car crash. You don't need to dog runs in front of the car. They sort of go, and then you cut away and you maybe hear a crash sound effect or something. I don't know how that's a bit cheesy.
Or if you don't want them to have. Because in that scenario, I suppose they'd have the remnants of the crash on them, which perhaps would make them more obviously scary, which would be maybe a problem for some of the stuff they do with the rest of the characters. But in that case, have them poisoned, have them eat something poisonous.
Although I do love the gag. Physical. I do love the gag where the car crashes, they turn around and the dog is just on that plank of wood that's keeping the car up. And then the dog gets off and it goes. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
By the way, I meant to ask you about this. I found that scene when I was quite young very shocking because obviously I'm watching the movie, I'm discovering the movie, and it's to me it seems to be a movie about a nice couple living in a country house.
Absolutely.
I found their sudden deaths quite surprising.
Yeah. You're literally like, what the fuck's going on? Like, and then it just cuts to them back in the house, but it's just gone a bit batshit. Like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, huh?
Yeah, I found that very surprising, which is what was very effective. I also loved, by the way, this idea that when you leave the house, it doesn't stop you from leaving. The sort of, I don't want to call it lazy, because a lot of really good things have used this idea, but the idea that when you're a ghost and you're trapped to a location, if you try to leave, you just end up coming back in. It's like a and you're just sort of facing the opposite way, and you're just back in the house. I like the idea that if they can leave, but when they leave, they end up in this like weird void space with these giant crazy sandworms.
Yeah, and I like the explanation that it's because the house is where their soul is. But I think again though, it is cleaner maybe if they died in the house. Right. The more I think about it, poison them and have it be not entirely clear whether the estate agent did it deliberately so she could sell the house. That's a good idea.
Yes, that's great.
Just add this layer to that character where you don't know, and don't make it a big thing. It's just a subtle hint where you just don't know for sure.
Yeah, she's in the house when they're preparing whatever food or drink poisons them, and they don't show her doing it, but there's a slight implication maybe she did. That's great. Yeah. Yes, please. I would love that. Although I guess the part of you then would be going like make the plot about them getting revenge on her. I guess if you thought that, but yeah, you have to play you have to play it very subtle to avoid that problem. But yeah, I agree. That's a great way to do it.
But to be honest with you, I didn't particularly bump up against the fact that they're not wet. So.
No, it wasn't a massive issue for me either, but it was something I did think about once I started thinking more thoroughly about it for this podcast. When Adam and Barbara are in the office, this one. I have questions about this choice from Tim Burton. When Adam and Barbara are in the office, a voice on the PA system announces Flight 409 is arriving at Gate 3. Now, there is a real Flight 409 that crashed into the mountains in Wyoming in 1955, killing all passengers and crew. Now, I guess the joke is that's that flight arriving and therefore all of the souls that were on it in the afterlife. But that's a real flight and real people. It was at the time described as one of the worst plane crashes in history. It had I don't have the death toll here, but there were 3 plane crashes in 55 and a total of 66 casualties. And to this day, no one knows why that plane crashed. That feels in bad taste.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I understand what he was going for, kind of like a weird, morbid thingy, sort of like a little. I'm not trying to think like kind of like a morbid, sort of subtle, like a bit of not trivia. I'm trying to think what the word I'm looking for. It's like an Easter egg almost.
Yeah, kind of something that makes people go, oh.
Yeah, if you know about it, I'll look into it. But here's the thing: people going, oh well, it happened in 1955. That crash was a long time ago. But this movie was made in the 80s. This movie was made 30 years later. So this would be, I mean, what's the equivalent for that now? Like 80 odd? No, early 90s now? 30 years later. So that'd be like us. That'd be like a modern day version of this movie doing something on the Munich air disaster or something like that. You just wouldn't do it. It seems in bad taste.
Yeah.
Look,
I agree.
It's whatever. It's a little Easter egg about a thing that happened, and it's trivia. But like, yeah, weird choice because it doesn't really add anything to the movie. So I don't know why you would do it. But anyway, the scene where Beetlejuice eats a fly is a small tribute to the horror movie The Fly, which Gina Davis was also in.
Cool.
Oh, I suppose it's more of a tribute to the original, the 1958 version than the 86 version. But yeah, Keaton himself was actually offered the role in the 86 version and turned it down. That would have been kind of funny though, because obviously that would have meant both Gina Davis and Michael Keaton worked on both those movies together. Apparently, when Beetlejuice pulls the fly underground, you can just about hear the fly scream the famous line from The Fly, "Help me, help me." I didn't realize that was because that's such a random. Yeah, it's just a thing you would say, isn't it? Help me, help me. But yeah, that is obviously The Fly.
That's a nice nod.
Yeah, it is. Apparently, if you're careful, keep a close eye on it, Delia has a knack for repurposing clothing to wear in different styles. In one scene, she wears a red sweater that Charles wore in a previous scene, but she's wearing them as pants. She wears the sweater upside down with her legs in the armholes, and is held up at her waist with suspenders. During the Dietz's first dinner in their new house, Delia is seen with an elaborate decorative black hairband wrapped around her head. That nearly resembles feathers, and the headband is actually a pair of intertwined women's gloves. That must I would assume that's a choice that the costume department made with Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah.
But a really
cool.
fun little choice. One thing I did think was interesting was Nadia, for the first half of the movie, was trying to work out if she was definitely a stepmom or a mum, because Nadia said, because they were both at the dinner table, and Delia is wearing this headband outfit that has gloves around the hair, and Lydia is wearing a full veil. And Nadia said, I think they must be related. They're both quite dramatic, aren't they?
Well, I suppose we don't know how long she's been a stepmom for, do we?
Yeah. Maybe she's influenced her somehow. But I thought that was a very good observation.
Yeah, definitely.
During the scene in the graveyard, after the Maitlands leave and Beetlejuice gets mad and kicks... Oh, yeah. After they leave and Beetlejuice gets mad and kicks the tree, it was not supposed to fall. But on that take, the set tree did, in fact, fall over. And Michael Keaton's reaction of, nice fucking model, honk honk, was actually him talking to the set designer who had messed it up because the whole thing fell over. But Burton loved it so much, he left the blooper in the movie. Because it actually works in character also, as Beetlejuice yelling at Adam having made the model.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, one of my favourite bits of trivia, I think. That's a really good one. When Netflix opened its doors in 1988 and was a DVD rental service, the very first DVD they mailed to anyone was Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
I like that one. I don't know why. I just found that interesting.
That's a fun fact. That's nice.
Little fun fact. The first DVD Netflix ever shipped was Beetlejuice before, becoming what Netflix are today.
I think it's also
don't even
because
realise that Netflix started as a DVD service.
It also implies that, someone up for taking the risk of an unknown DVD rental service, the Venn diagram of that person and also being a fan of Beetlejuice is just interesting to me.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Who's that person?
Yeah, I want to meet that guy. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm taking a risk on a new service that looks, I don't know, it looks like they sell the DVDs or whatever, or like so that we'll find out. Yeah, well, what am I choosing first? Beetlejuice, I guess. Why not?
Yeah.
The movie,
considering they started as a DVD rental place as well, like fair play for the future proofing of the name Netflix.
Yeah, it was very.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
they really lucked out on that. Was a clever person that thought of that name that still is more appropriate for what they do now.
Yeah,
than it is.
But I guess
how they started.
But it also does work for what they were doing at the time. It's, you know, instead of going into a physical brick and mortar blockbuster to get your DVDs, you go on the net to get your flicks. Like, it still works. But yeah you're right. It had a longevity to it they probably didn't even realize it had.
No, definitely.
Just two more. So the next was the box office success of the movie did create plans for a sequel, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. A script was commissioned, and both Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder were signed on to reprise their respective roles. But Burton lost interest in the project and went on to direct Batman '89 and obviously Batman Returns 1992 instead. As of 2015, Warner Brothers was still trying to get the original sequel concept into production. So not a new one that they've had a new writer and director to develop. They were still trying to get Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian made in 2015.
Wow.
That's bonkers. I hope that doesn't ever happen. I don't mind the idea of a sequel, but I don't want to see Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. I really don't.
I'm more because also I think it's too, you know, it's a bit like Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Like, no matter what happens, when it finally comes out, it won't be seen as a classic because the story of the making of it is more interesting than the finished result, and I think that would be the case.
Its journey to getting made is kind of fascinating because it's a movie that's essentially been in development since the 80s. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but it would be interesting to watch the new. Everything's positive, doesn't say anything negative about anything really anymore. Kevin Smith review it when he was so critical in the past of the idea. Yeah. Seeing him approach that with his new persona of, if I don't like something, I'm not going to talk about it, would be funny.
Yeah, I agree. The final piece of trivia, Chris, we are going to my world famous segment. It's back, Chris. You thought you'd escaped it, didn't come up last week, but guess what, Chris? Cars exist.
I'm pleased to see it back.
Wow. This is a good one, actually. So the Maitland's car is a 1977 Volvo 245DL. Now, normally, Cars Exist trivia might end there. Just that's what the car is, right? Cars exist. But got a little bit more information, because at the time this movie was made, the reputation of the Volvo sort of 240 series was that it was the safest car in the world. They were reporting at the time that no one had been killed in a Volvo of that series and vintage. So the fact that Adam and Barbara died in one was apparently a massive joke to Volvo owners and other car-savvy viewers.
There you go.
A little bit of meta-humour. Probably unintentional, I'll be honest. I imagine this is how the conversation went. Tim, we need to choose the car they're going to crash in. Which one do you like the look of? That one looks kind of retro-y and like it might fit in a sort of small town community. It kind of has that vibe to it. Cool. Pick that one then.
Yeah.
There's no
Decision
way.
made.
There's
Cheers,
no way in a million years Tim Burton went, well, actually, you know, that is purportedly the safest car. So it would be kind of funny and a bit of a wink if we make that the car they die in.
Yeah.
But I'll still take it.
No, great triv, but I'm with you. I don't think that was a Burton special.
No, it wasn't a Burton special. So there you go. That's Beetlejuice. Come back in 5 years' time when we sit down to review Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian.
Wouldn't that be great? Although, having said that, if Bill and Ted's anything to go by, it'll take us even longer to get round to reviewing it.
Yeah, that's true. We still need to come back to that, don't we? But that brings me on to the big question, Chris. Where are we going next week?
Well, I think I thought about it a little bit, but not as much as I sometimes do. And I had an instinctive thought from the beginning. And I'm going to go with that instinctive thought because I think similar, but if not more so, to today's discussion of we both loved this film as a child. Is it suitable for children? Does it hold up? I think does it hold up is a big question for this film. So, and, you know, I wanted to pick something more well-known like you than All About Steve. Something that maybe other people would not have to do any homework to listen to. So we're going to go with Dumb and Dumber next week, man.
Interesting choice. Yes. So, yeah, I this is on my list of things I would ultimately this would have come up no matter what. I think we both have a big had a big fondness for this movie as children. But you're right. Does this movie hold up? That is a big question because I'll tell you now, I have not watched it since God. I don't remember when I last saw that movie. So actually, let's be realistic. It could even be as far back as maybe like high school or college or something was the last time I actually dipped my head into that one and had a viewing. Whew.
I think I caught it's the kind of catch it on TV, and we don't really do that in the UK, but I think like it's on ITV quite a bit, so there's a potential that I caught the latter half of it at some point within the last 10 years, but I don't think I've actively sat down and watched it for at least a decade like yourself.
I feel like I definitely might have found a scene online or something. I have a vague memory at some point of going back to watch when they go to the party and they're wearing the suits, because that has that bullshit.
Did you watch the sequel?
I did, I think. Yeah,
as in Dumb and Dumber 2, not When Harry Met Lloyd.
Yeah, I think I believe I did at the time, but I've almost no memory of it.
Yeah, I think I did. I remember it. I don't think it's as bad as people think. There's one or two good gags in it. Like, I don't think it's the train wreck.
There was one joke I remember
reviewed as,
but I think it might have been in the trailer. So I'm maybe I'm not sure. It's the one where he's on the phone. He's when they're talking to each other on the phone, and the other one says, "Shh, it's my dad."
Yeah,
it's my dead dad. Actually, is the line.
Yeah. That's there's a lot of setup to that, but it's very good. And I like the one where they leave a place with an envelope which has the address of where they're going to, and there's this big road trip style montage, and then they end up back at the place that they've just left because they've not turned the envelope over. Which again, I thought was quite a funny gag. Yeah.
So I'm looking for that's a good choice. I think that's a solid choice for this. It definitely would have come up sometime or another anyway. But like I'm intrigued to follow suit with this one and sort of follow the theme of does it hold up. I'm intrigued to sort of that's a good follow up to this. So yeah, come back in a week's time for that. I'm excited for that.
Or Dan, if you're on Patreon,
yeah,
why wait a week? It's there now, baby.
So you're telling me that if someone is listening to this on like iTunes or Spotify and they're sort of listening to it on the official original release date that we've set out for these, that if they want to listen to next week's episode right now, all they have to do is give as little as $1 a month over at patreon.com/nothingbutstatic.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yep.
It's you could almost say it's barely an inconvenience.
I was going to say, like, why are we suddenly ripping off pitch meeting?
I do not know.
They've done some good ones recently.
They've done a few. They've been on a roll, man. They've done a few really good ones. Like, for those who don't know, what
and they're getting
in. I'm not a huge fan of. They're on the Screen Rant website, right, or something? What are they part of? One of them. Yeah. But it's the pitch meetings videos. They're really, really good.
Because they're so easy to do, they must be, now that they're getting more and more popular, they must be a real, I know they like linked up and done a joint thing, but it must be a real problem for Honest Trailers, because obviously Screen Junkies it's quicker to produce, so Screen Junkies are getting in there a lot quicker with the bigger movies than Honest Trailers are. You know what I mean? Like the Suicide Squad and all the big releases recently.
Yeah, so Screen Rant have been able to just like throw them out like after like, a day of release.
Yeah. Whereas Honest Trailers takes a bit more
time to basically write it quickly, record it, and you can. Yeah, it's very easy to produce it just him in front of a green screen, isn't it?
So
Yeah,
I imagine that's causing some challenges. But
yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, yeah. So on Screen Rant, they do these pitch meeting videos. They're very funny. The guy that writes them is very funny. I'm not a huge fan of Screen Rant in general, but those videos are excellent.
Yeah, he's very good. So yeah, you can check that out on Patreon, or otherwise we'll.
No, you can't. Yeah, to clarify, you can check out next week's episode.
Oh,
on
sorry,
Patreon, not Screen Rant's content. We haven't put Screen Rant's content on our Patreon.
We're not just plagiarizing.
It's just me and you doing the videos verbatim. Like we write them down what he says, then we record it, but it's us, and then we put them up as if they're us. Yeah. So that's the other ways you can support us, of course, is by going and reviewing us on the various platforms that we're on. We're on iTunes and Spotify and all those places. You can go give us a like or a review or whatever. I went and looked recently. We had a couple of nice reviews that people have written on some of these podcasts, and I sometimes forget to check that they're there. And then I'll have a nice day where I sometimes have a bad day, and I'll have a look to see. Give me pick me up. But yeah, occasionally nice. I go have a look, and I find these really nice reviews that have been left in the meantime, and they do help push us up in the algorithms. The other way you can help us, of course, is by subscribing to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic UK. That also helps. The other benefit, if you'd like to being a patron, is you get to ask questions, and you get to get access to our Discord, and there's the yellow lounge of the Discord, which is like a special section just for patrons where you can ask questions that we then answer on the podcast. I'm storing them up. I've got 2 or 3 that I've from the last couple of weeks that I'm pocketing for now. We'll either bring them back towards the end of this series or once we go back to analysing Avatar, because these are already a bit long, so maybe I'll save them for analysing Avatar.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's there's another way you can get in touch with us and interact with us, and that's. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. We've said too many things. Too much speaking has happened, and now I wish to be silent.
We've done well. We will. I'm looking forward to Dumb and Dumber next week.
Yeah, me too. Very excited. So thanks everyone for listening. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham,
and we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Dumb and Dumber.